Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Knowledge Labs presented by F-Stop. We're going to have a bi-monthly series where we talk to some of the smartest and most interesting, maybe funny, visual creatives from all around the world. And the world is all screwed up right now. There's plenty of room for getting inspired and having a good time, and that's really what we're here to do. So we're excited to have you guys join us, and we can't wait to share the knowledge that we learned from all these incredible creatives that we're going to be talking to. Today, we've got Andrei, Duman, and I. We're going to be discussing our lives, how it's affected by COVID, and how we're staying inspired, and how we're going to get back out there and continue to keep creating.
Yeah, and again, thank you for having me. Thank you, F-Stop, for putting all this together. I'm really excited about this. I think, not that we haven't had enough Zoom meetings. Everyone's been on at least 1,000 with everything that's going on, but we want to do things a little bit differently. We're going to get a variety of people from a multitude of different sections: photographers, videographers, digitex. I just think anyone that's creative with just the concentration on what are you doing, how are you staying creative, alive, inspired. And I think it's just going to be really fun to sort of get a different perspective every single few weeks.
Yep, I think that's great. I mean, it's not just going to be photographers. It's not just DPs.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking to a little bit of everybody, which is what makes it kind of cool.
Yeah. So every week is going to be something different. So definitely keep an eye out. We have a new website that's going to be coming out with this, and every single week, every episode will get recorded and will get put on that. So if you miss it, don't worry about it. You have the date for the next one. You can always view them back. We felt it was best to sort of make an introduction on who Jonny is and who myself or who I am, and then let's kick it off. Let's get going.
Yeah, right. Well, so Andrei is an award-winning photographer. He's shot all over the world with all of the biggest brands. I'm sure that you guys have seen his work, whether it's in the automotive space or in adventure travel. The guy's always on a plane. He's always taking pictures. I don't get to go along for the ride, although I have begged a few times. I don't get to be put in the suit.
I do have a spot for you.
So he's going to be our host going forward, and so yeah, let's chat. Tell me about what's going on. What are you working on right now, and what's keeping you happy and inspired?
Not much. The world is crazy right now. Everything is obviously still kind of upside down. The US is a little bit different. I'm sure there's going to be people from around the world watching this. I live in California, in Los Angeles, California. Things are a lot more open now than they were before, so that's good. It's promising. The vaccines are kicking in a lot more. We can eat outdoors, and from the creative perspective, it seems to be some stuff moving in terms of the video. I know they've been shut down for a long time, and the photography world usually lags behind the video production. So we're still trying to, I don't think it's kicked in any sort of gear. I still think we're probably in gear 1, to be perfectly honest. But it's been really difficult, to be honest. The last few months have been really tough. I don't know what it's been like for you trying to stay creative and keep coming up with concepts, especially when the client base has really dried up. How do you make yourself continue and be like, oh, this one thing that I never got around to doing, now I want to do it, or here's a complete different idea it's never necessarily going to see the light of day from a client perspective, where it's budgets and monetary value involved. It's been rather challenging. In fact, I actually took the whole of February off. I just decided, you know what, I need a break. That's
good for you. I should have done that. Looking back at a year later, I never did that. I took a couple of days off here and there.
Yeah.
But I never really did, because I just had this optimistic view that things were going to come back. And if I stopped, if I took a break, then I was going to fall behind. And then when it opened back up, then I wasn't going to be ready to go. So
I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm curious to know your take on this. I don't know how many other people share this view. This is maybe just me, but did you feel an extra sense of pressure when it first started, 3 months in, and when we realized this was going to be ongoing, it wasn't going away anytime soon? Did you feel knowing that your client base was probably, and your job for clients was getting dried up, did you feel that sort of extra pressure that I really have to create, I have to keep doing, I have to keep making something? And then when you did that and you put your own money and time and effort into it and didn't quite get the traction that you're hoping, just because no one was doing anything,
Right.
you then felt the extra need to do even more? Because I really felt that. And to me, it's been that sort of building one on top of the other, where I just felt I'm kind of missing the forest from the trees, where I'm way too focused on the wrong thing, that I felt like I needed a little bit of time out to just not even shoot anything. So, and I recently moved home, so that was kind of like a nice escape to kind of take my mind off it a little bit.
Yeah, I think at the start, we didn't know what was going to happen. And so I just put my head down and said, I'm just going to there's nothing else to do. Can't go see my friends, can't do anything. So I'm going to just try to shield it, and I have to stay home anyway. So I'm just going to keep working and working and working and working. And that only got me so far. And then I kind of hit a wall and said, you know what, I hate this. This sucks. And I think I'm sure everybody kind of went through this roller coaster of these ups and downs.
And everyone hits a wall at a different time and a different hardness. Someone hits really soft walls, and someone can hit a really hard wall where you're like just total shutdown.
Right. So as far as pressure goes, I think I did feel some pressure, because it felt like, okay, we have this unique time period where nobody is doing anything. So job after job goes away. And you think, okay, what I need to do is I'm going to take advantage of this time, and I'm going to develop, and I'm going to write, and I'm going to create on paper, on the ideation stage. This time period has never been here before. So I have to do that now, so that when it's time to go back to pitching, when it's time to go back out into the world, I have a dozen projects that I wrote. So to me, that pressure was, you're never going to have this off time. So you have to spend it creating and developing. And so then you go back stronger. So I guess that was my pressure. And then fast forward, and we're still locked down. So.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting, because I felt the exact same way. Because I was so busy previously before COVID. As soon as COVID hit, in some ways for a few days it was nice to, quote unquote, stop the wheels moving a little bit. But then I really got into, I need to keep creating, because otherwise I'm going to lose my mind. I need to just constantly be coming up with ideas. I mean, this is just who I am as a person. I like to be creative. A lot of my projects will never see the light of day, because they might be a good idea, but they come out junk. And you need to respect that as an artist, that you tried something and it just didn't work out. So there was a lot of that period. There was a lot of that sort of testing. At the same time, to your point, I had a lot of projects as well, like I'm sure you did too, that I finally got around to getting to them, because I just didn't have time to do them otherwise.
So what's it been like to shoot during COVID? Do you have a specific project that you liked, or one that went particularly well?
I mean, shooting was obviously difficult just because of the conditions that we're all in. So obviously the teams have to be a lot smaller. You have to adhere to all the guidance. There's a lot more planning involved. It is doable. It just adds a few more layers of complexity, I guess. So I think that's one of the, we finished the McLaren shoot that was done in the studio, obviously as much social distancing as you can. We did the Aston Martin shoot that was done outside. So again, much smaller crews than normal. But I think some of the ones that I was able to dedicate most of my time with were the ones at home, the ones that were done in a more controlled environment, where I don't need a huge amount of people around me. I can, I know how to work a studio. Is it easier to have more people? Yes, but obviously it's just, given what's going on, it just makes more sense for me and maybe just one assistant to be there.
Sure.
So, we did a lot of product work, but I think probably the one that was certainly the most challenging one was finishing, and again, it gave me the chance to do it because I didn't have any other jobs, was at the exoskeleton project. I've been working on that for so it took me about a year and 10 months to complete the whole project, and there was only 24 images.
Wow.
So yeah, the complexity with that was pretty intense. Just because obviously we're working with specimens. So just to give some background for people that don't know the exoskeleton, you can go on my website and it's interactive, so you can really zoom in. And basically, I partnered up with the University of California, as well as the Natural History Museum of San Diego, and they allowed me from their private collection, these incredible specimens. Some of them were absolutely bewildering. That are obviously tiny. These little insects. They're 10 millimeters. Some of them are a little bit larger. And I really wanted to shoot them in a way that really hasn't been done before with medium format. It's been done with 35 mil and some absolutely wonderful results, but I wanted to shoot on medium format, and that brings its own complexities in and of itself. So I'm a phase 1 shooter. I'm one of their US ambassadors, and I'm really fortunate to shoot with the IQ4, the 150 megapixels. And for me to be able to get the level of detail and the level of resolution that I really wanted, I had to work with really tight focusing distances. So my lens was only a few centimeters away from the actual specimen itself. Wow. So you can imagine the depth of field is just gigantic. Yeah. So to really be able to do that properly was you had to attach it to a technical camera. You couldn't shoot that through the regular XF, which is the main body of the phase 1. You had to attach it to a technical camera, which in this instance was the Alpha 12 FPS, which then gets attached to a mechanical rail that you program yourself to basically say, this is my near point, this is my far point. You have to do all these mathematical calculations to figure out the distance from the lens to the specimen, the distance from the back of the lens to the actual sensor, because you can adjust the bellows. So there was a really steep learning curve to really be able to even get to the point of just testing it. Wow. And then with the Rodenstock 105 mil lens, which is probably one of the greatest macro lenses ever made, it just allows me that focusing distance to be really tiny. So for something like the hedgehog fly, which is one of my favorite ones that came out, that was it's around 10 millimeters in size, and it was maybe around 4,000 images of focus stacked, continuous. Wow. So a ton of technical things that we had to overcome. Obviously, power was getting drained all the time, so you had to have continuous power. You had to have no vibrations whatsoever, and so many specimen shots were ruined because the garage door was opened, my AC turned on, vibrations in the ground. I had one in the middle of like a 6,000 stack. I had an earthquake happen because oh my gosh! So that ruined it. Yeah, so it was just the shooting aspect was incredibly complex, but love the way that it turned out.
Yeah, that's great. So was there a lot of compositing going on, or was it just, I mean, you would had to with the focus stacks,
yeah,
right?
So the huge thing was just getting to the point where I can shoot it properly. So many different, and I can talk for hours about this, but so many issues that we had to overcome, so many things that you didn't know was an issue until you really discovered it. So you had to then reshoot it over again. The second part of the complexity is, what do you do with all those files? I mean, you just have up to 6,000 images of something that is such tiny depth of fields. I mean, I was able to focus stack, this particular thing can focus stack in 1 micron increments. So for point of reference, a human hair is 75 microns. So if you can imagine in a span of a human hair, I can take 75 images. So it's a tremendous amount of images. What do you do with those? And this is the other massive complication, was finding the right software that can handle that. The files of the phase are IIQ files. Whatever software that I found, which I actually found to be the best one to be oh goodness, I just had an absolute mind blank. It'll come to me. The software that was used, Helicon is usually one that everyone goes to, but it can't handle deep stacks. So it can handle 100 images, 200 maybe.
Okay.
Talking about 6,000, it just doesn't do a very good job of it, and it does miss quite a lot of the files. So we had to convert the IIQ file to a TIFF because the program couldn't handle IIQ files. That can take up to 12 hours of just converting the files to a TIFF. So you have this TIFF files now. First of all, it just destroys your hard drives because it's just so much data.
Yeah.
Once you have those TIFF files, then you put in the program, and it's like a 30-step process to be able to, once you do this, you do this. Once you do that, you do that. So it's not a continuous flow. You have to literally try and time it as best as you can. That process, to just flatten it down to one image, one flat TIFF image, can take up to about 14 hours. So only then do I have an image that, quite frankly, after all the continuous shooting of the insect, which can take up to about 6 to 7 hours, then the conversion, then the flattening, only then can I actually see if I've made a mistake. Because up to that point, you can't, it's just literally slices of one tiny aspect of the insect that's sharp. Everything else is out of focus. So you can't see the full picture. So that's why, again,
it's kind of like back to the days of shooting on film where you don't know until.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just that you have to wait 35, 40 hours to see if what you've done actually worked, which again led to the delay and why it had to be done properly. I mean, I've shot hundreds of thousands of images that, again, will never see the light of day because something was off. The insect moved ever so slightly. Like you said, the AC may have just turned on for a split for 10 minutes. And in the middle of that, you just see softness when it should be sharp. Wow. But you just can't tell until you get to that point. So let's just assume you've done all that, you've got all your flat file, only then can you send it out for retouching. And that brings the other complication. Because you're working at such insane magnifications, there are things that you just can't see with the naked eye. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the first steps that I do after I've done my lighting, just setting up the studio, is you have to try and clean the bug as best as you can. And I use surgical loops and I use a camel hair brush just to try and get whatever debris is on it. Again, these are specimens that are not pristine in the sense of they're absolutely spotless. They're there for research purposes. They're part of the collection. So you want to clean it as best as you can, but there's so much that you miss. You can't see it with the naked eye. Only when you get the final TIFF file, you look at 100% or 200 or 300%, and there are just hundreds, if not thousands, of microscopic little debris that's on it that you just can't get off. So you have to clean that. So as a point of reference, the average retouching that was needed for each of the specimens was about 45 hours of retouching. The longest was 86 hours, just because of so much cleanup that had to be done. You literally have to go pixel by pixel. So it's incredibly time consuming to do. And that's why I think this project really, it took so long because it needed to. There's just no way to speed this up, to do it properly. So.
Did you use hot lights or strobes, or how did you light it?
It was through strobes. So it was firing every 3 seconds. I would have the rail adjust and move however many microns that I chose initially to do it. And it would just be a strobe that would get it. I tried continuous, and that was another thing. That's why it took so long. I did a few months of just testing different lighting setups. Is it best to shoot it in a white styrofoam box to kind of emulate, kind of like a studio environment? And I found like I was just getting way too much bounce, way too much light that I didn't like. So it's really down to your own personal preference and how you wanted the image to look in the end. But I've never had so much trial and error with one project. And through that process, through making all these mistakes, I've learned more about photography from that one project that I've done in the last 5 or 6 years, no question. And you can and again, like what we discussed earlier, making those mistakes, learning from those, even though it's a macro project, I've learned more about focus stacking that I then apply when I do a car photography in a studio. There's just so many little tricks that you learn along the way that gets applied. So going back to sort of keep making those mistakes, keep doing those projects, and you learn something that you can apply to something you wouldn't even think of. Yeah,
I think that's great. What kind of lights did you use?
At the time I was on pro photos, so I was on D2s. I had 3 D2s, shooting through scrims. I tried shooting directly with no scrims, and it was just, again, the light was too harsh. I needed something a little bit softer. So it was a 3-light setup that was constantly adjusting for every specimen because each one had something a little bit different that you want to highlight. depending on their shape, depending on the color, depending on something that's unique about them. So that lighting setup, the cleaning, it would take me close to an hour and a half to 2 hours before I was ready to start the stack. With the mathematical calculation, making sure that everything's good to go. My continuous power is there. There was no issues with the back, no issues with the rail. Again, there was just so much going on. I mean, I was really pushing this gear to a point that it's not probably designed to do. It's not, phase one is not meant to be shooting 6,000 images continuously for 7 hours, you know? So
Right.
I got a lot of information that I gave back to phase one, which was really helpful for them to just improve it.
It does seem like sometimes the hardest, the most stressful, the craziest shoots that we do are the ones that end up being the most rewarding, and the ones that we, once you can step back from it.
Yeah.
And you're not,
I hated this project.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
I love it right now. In fact, I just moved into a new home. I just got one of the bugs massively printed. It's a 48 by 64 and it looks phenomenal, but just reliving that time of doing it, I hated it. But I knew, even though I hated it, I knew I was onto something. That's why I never let up. And that's why I didn't want to rush it. That's why it took me like a year and 10 months to do. I felt it was going to be something really special, but there were times where I mean, oh my God, how many times did I scream in my office because its head moved ever so slightly down, and 45 hours later I found out, and the whole stack is ruined. I have to start all over again. All of that is just wasted. So it was incredibly frustrating. This is not shooting an iPhone or a watch where you can maybe do 60 or maybe 100 images of a stack. I mean, this is thousands and thousands of images.
Wow.
So
wow.
That was my big one that I shot during, that I think I'm just really glad I had the time to do during COVID, because it would have probably taken me even longer if I had regular jobs like we did in the day. But what about you? What was some of your big stuff that you did?
My favorite one that I did during COVID was actually down in Brazil. We went,
I know,
which also seems like extra crazy to do during COVID to go international, but it was
Brazil.
What's that?
Especially Brazil too. I mean,
especially Brazil, yeah. But it was really refreshing to, I used to be on the road all the time, and then you got a year of not flying anywhere, so it felt good to get back on a plane and pull that passport out. So it was pretty cool. We went and we shut down the largest water park in South America.
Oh, wow.
And we had one of Red Bull's top wakeboarders going up and down the water slides.
That's awesome.
And so it was about as weird and wacky as you could get. But it took 4 days, which is probably longer than it should have, because it's just everything moves a little bit slower.
Exactly.
We had about a week of testing. So the athlete we tried all sorts of different winch combinations. We tried all of the different attractions and trying to figure out, like, where does the camera go was almost the easy part. The challenging part was, how is this guy going to wakeboard down things that have never been wakeboarded on before?
Right. Yeah,
you spend more time testing than you do shooting, trying to figure out how it's going to work. And once we sort of,
but you're going to remember that. That's if it was just another shoot like any other ones that you've done before,
totally.
The camera goes here, the setting is this, like you want to, even though those jobs are necessary, you want to be doing something that's just out of the box, just to sort of reset, respark your sort of why I got into this in the first place. Because I want to do something that's maybe never been done before, really push a technology.
Yep, absolutely. And it totally did that, because it was very easy to get down. You lose bids, the phone calls stop coming in, and then you get down on why are we doing this? Why am I here? And then you get back on a project like that, and like, oh yeah, okay, this is why I do this job. So,
inspiration. It's funny how inspiration can just come from something that may have maybe just sounded completely normal, like just any other shoot, and then you realize, oh, actually, this is kind of cool. This is kind of different. Resparks that love of what you're doing. But I know a lot of people that I speak to. Like I said, I've had moments where it's just, you do get down, where you really find it hard to find that motivation to get back into the studio and try something, when you're like, what's the point? But you've really, I can't stress this enough, you have to force yourself to do that, because that's It's just going to keep you going. It's going to keep your mind fresh. It's going to maybe come up with something that might be different. You have the time now more than ever, probably, to really play around with stuff. So I think that would be my one takeaway for everyone is however much it sucks. I mean, and take your time. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. You can take a day off. You can take 2 days off. But it's still good to sort of continue to push and go back out there and keep shooting.
I know some photographers that have done nothing. They haven't shot at all during COVID. They just are taking this time to just pause and take their time. Then I know other photographers that are just kind of like me. They went nuts for a few months. They needed to create, needed to keep producing, even at their own cost. And then they just, each one of them hit a wall at different times.
Right.
So it's just been really, it's such an interesting, I think we're going to be talking about this period, obviously, until the day we die. How is this going to affect the industry when things do open back up? Because I was the same as you. I need to keep creating, not just to keep my mind sane, but also let's use this opportunity to learn something new, try a different technique, try a different project that I didn't get around to doing. And then if it does work out well, when the floodgates open, I have something to show. I have, this is what I did. I didn't just sit on my butt and did nothing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how I'm sure everyone's got a different view of where they are in that spectrum. But it's how do you think? Tell me, how do you think the industry is going to be? I mean, you work more in film. How is your stuff being? How do you think it's going to be when in 6 months' time, for example?
Well, I think it's twofold. From the advertising perspective, the ad agencies had to adapt to this new world, and so they did what they could, and many of them put out these commercials. There's a really funny video of a montage of a dozen different spots from a dozen brands across all genres, all categories. They were all the exact same spot.
Yeah.
Melancholy, B-roll, stock footage, stuff that they already had. Somber piano music, and a voiceover about how we're all in this together. It was exactly what everybody said. Well, what else are we going to do? We have to put out stuff.
Yeah, and it has to be content that's relevant, that we feel the pain with everyone. Yeah.
Right. So they all did it, and it accomplished the goal of producing messaging, but it didn't accomplish the goal of any brand affinity for customers. Yeah. And in some cases, it probably reversed that. And the ad agency and client people that I've spoken with have said, yeah, we're not really all that proud of that work, but we kind of we didn't know.
Do something, right?
Back, we kind of feel like we've got egg on our face a little bit, like, oh, it's cringy. But the exciting part about it is that everybody is the takeaway is everybody is at this same level playing field. Nobody has any idea what's going on. Nobody has any idea what to do at this point. And so as a creative, your ideas are arguably just as good as a super senior ad exec or a CEO at Target, right? Everybody is leveled to, I don't know what to do. And so the inspiring part, the exciting part about it is, normally as a director, when I get brought on, it's typically pretty late. The agency has worked with the brand. They've already
established what they want to do. Yep.
I come in, I can tweak things a little bit, but the bigger the budget, the less control, the less tweaking I get to do, because there's just so much money at stake, and they've spent 9 months figuring it out.
Yep.
What this has done as said for the creatives, hey, you guys know just as much as the ad execs do. So I would say anybody that's out there coming up with, and this is just strictly for the advertising side of it, if you're coming up with a photo campaign, if you're coming up with a video campaign, your idea is no longer just brushed aside because you're not a 50-year veteran. Your idea is just as good and just as viable as somebody that has done this before. So I would say, if you're coming up with ideas, if you've got stuff, write that down, shoot it, pitch it, get out there, call everybody you possibly know, because we're in this pure state of chaos, and we're when we're in chaos, that's where there's true opportunity. That's where there's true, I hate to use disruption because it's so like just trendy, but truly, and as smart as these ad execs are, as smart as these clients are, and they really are, they need to come up with something fresh. They need to look for somebody that's not in their tiny little bubble, in their little echo chamber. And so there's more opportunity for photographers, directors, writers. There's more opportunity to break in right now and to do those kinds of things because everybody's searching for that next idea. So I think that it's, despite all the craziness, there's still very much a thing there. And I think that is a part of a glimmer of hope that I, continue to pitch despite getting turned down all the time because budgets dry up. On the so anyway, so yeah, the film is a whole different conversation, but as far as advertising goes and commercial production, that's
no, but I agree 100% with everything you said. I'm curious as a, on the flip side of of that argument, I was curious to know your take on this. Yes, I 100% agree with you that your ideas are more valuable in some sense, or equal to the execs. I think the problem may become, once they get those ideas, are they willing to take that risk to actually go ahead and do it because of budget restrictions, because the brand doesn't know its identity, because maybe it's just not ready, it doesn't feel it's the right time to do it. And then secondly, who do they end up using? Are they going to go with someone that they've used in the past, that they know the quality, they can trust them?
Sure.
They're not going to take a risk on someone that maybe is up and coming. And I think, so while I 100% agree with you, I think the flip side of that, and I've heard this from some other creators that I'm working with, they love an idea, but they say, unfortunately, we just can't go ahead with it. So there is still resistance from that perspective. And I think that's 100% COVID driven. It would have been completely different if it wasn't COVID. But I do agree with you, keep coming up with those ideas, keep being creative, keep pitching them forward. Like you said, this chaos can lead to opportunities. But it's just interesting to see how something that wouldn't have never even thought about is now an issue. And lastly, and the other thing as well, my retoucher was telling me, he couldn't get to my work because all these companies, they weren't shooting anything. This was more at the beginning, I guess, or the middle of COVID. They're not shooting anything. So they were just rummaging through the rubbish bin of what they shot for B-roll to try and make it into, the next big thing. A lot of CG work was very heavy on CG, again, because they couldn't shoot. So it's just very interesting how the market or the industry is really shifting in areas that, not they wouldn't have done so normally, it's just it's exasperated certain sectors and maybe dumbed down some of the other ones. So it's really anyone's guess of how this is going to look. Are we just going to go back to normal life, quote unquote, and sort of take this period as like a complete pause and it just go back to like it used to be before COVID? Or are there going to be different sectors that really outshine and maintain that sort of momentum that they've had during COVID? It's TBD, I guess, but yeah.
I think another thing that has come out of this, and my view tends to be very optimistic and looking for, where can we be successful? I think that another thing that we are seeing here is the value of entertainment, and I'm talking beyond just going and watching a movie or TV show, because obviously we've seen that. That's a whole nother conversation that's gone wrong. But as far as advertising goes, we're more engaged, more screen time than ever before, because what else? We're not doing anything else. And so I believe that the positive side of that is that we're going to move towards more, and I've heard it from brands, I've heard it from agencies with pitches, like, okay, how can we integrate the product organically? I don't want it to be sell. How can we go tell a story that the brand also gets to be a part of it? As a creative, that's a dream. That's what
it's open doors, right?
That's what we have all wanted to do from the start. If you work in advertising, you work in advertising so that you can tell a story that just happens to have a brand involved, right?
Right,
So
right.
I think we're going to see a bigger shift toward that. We're going to see longer form commercials because
Oh, really?
are
Interesting. Okay.
they're going
I
to be
would
more.
think you would. I would have thought you'd see like more condensed, more condensed. That's just more not on
Nobody
repeat,
gives
but
a
just
nobody gives a shit about a 30-second TV spot unless it's the Super Bowl.
yeah.
The rest of the year, you dread having to watch these stupid 30-second commercials. And, I mean, I make them. So
Can't
but
copy that. Yeah.
but the audiences, I mean, think about when you watch TV, if somebody were to play, you look at a 30-minute episode of TV, for instance, non-streamer broadcast, there are 7 to 8 minutes of commercial time during that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Almost
That's
a third
crazy.
of your 30 minutes is an ad.
Yeah.
I just think our tolerance for traditional advertising has been decreasing over the years. And now it's even more so. Like, I would sit and I would watch a 2-minute short film
Yeah.
because I want to watch the story. I get involved in the characters.
Yeah.
Rather, 2 minutes would be 4:30s. I would sit and I would watch a 2-minute piece. 4:30s, I would probably get on my phone. I might
And just swipe through. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
yeah, so I'm hoping it does seem like that trend it's been happening for a little while. I think it's going to continue to go even further now towards this more kind of entertaining style of advertising. So
And that's interesting because I don't know what's going to happen to the photography world. The commercial aspect of things. I think there's always going to be a need for cars, for example, to be shot, but at the same time, CG is making a huge comeback, and there's always going to be a need for a Pepsi bottle to be photographed. But again, CG is making a big comeback. So again, with this COVID, how much has CG been exaggerated to really move up and sort of overtake? Again, I think photography will always have a place, but I do worry about where that will fit. And whatever's left, are you going to need something? I shoot on a phase 1. I'm one of their ambassadors, and I'm on 150 megapixels. Is that going to be what clients are looking for? Because that'll be the closest resolution to maybe, let's say, a CG, or as close as you can get. Or are we going to, these Sony and Fuji coming out with the really small cameras that are more for video, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think that's more of the market that they're going with. But at the same time, increasing the megapixels, I don't know exactly where that's going to land. I think it's going to be really interesting to see when 3 to 6 months after, quote unquote, the floodgates open, which sectors are we going to see a bounce in?
right.
And what kind of budgets are we looking at? Are we going to see a third of the budgets that we were seeing before COVID? Again, because brands don't quite know how to rebrand themselves and exactly what kind of content they're looking for. So I think there's going to be that equalization period for a while. But again, that's just my gut feeling on kind of what I'm hearing.
Right. I think photo is a really interesting dynamic because it's not going to affect the industry as a whole. It's going to affect the genres. So if you're a landscape photographer, probably not going to be as affected by it. You can't capture that you can't do it any other way than going out there and doing it. There's a realness, there's an honestness to those types of pictures. I would say same with portraits, same with anything with like a human or an animal as your subject.
Yeah, fashion, but I don't think fashion will be that massively impacted.
Right. I think when you get into, well, I've always wondered how much, like, if I'm a photographer and I'm just getting started, or if I'm just coming out of college, especially now, do I focus on learning lighting and crafting the story in one image? Or do I say, okay, I am going to learn those things because you can't be a photographer without understanding lighting.
Yeah.
do I go hard down this path, or do I go down the path of post and say the tools have gotten better than they were even 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago when we started coming up? There was Photoshop, there was Lightroom, of course, but it
nowhere
wasn't
near at the level. Nowhere
not,
near. Yeah, of course.
So to a budding photographer, a growing photographer now, where do you spend your time learning? Do you go focus on the software? Do you focus on the CG, on the set extension? I as far as video goes, I love the idea of set extension because I still shoot practically, but I shoot practically here.
Yeah.
And
Your
here,
vision is over. Yeah.
so I can create a completely unique world, but it's still rooted in that honesty of like a real character in a real location. Photography is the same way. So like, what do you think? Where would you go if you're just growing, just starting?
I think it really depends on what your subject is going to be. You nailed it. Aerial photography and landscape and animals, you're not going to really change that. Do you need to know Photoshop and how to make changes to an image without looking completely fake? That goes without saying, no matter what you're doing. I think when you're getting into the more conceptual, more as a product photography, automotive, I think that blending of the CG sort of ultra realistic or even unrealistic sort of environments where you can place a car that looks like it's on Mars and you do some cool effects with that, or a Nike shoe that's has the Nike swooshes coming off the back of it. Knowing that, because speaking just from experience, I'm not very good. I can do Photoshop on my landscapes and my aerials. That's not a problem. Once I get into skin tones, once I get into product, once I get into automotive, can I do it? Yes. Does it look good? No. So what's the point? I'd rather give it to someone that's what they specialize in. So I would almost say try and see where your passion takes you, but you should learn how to at least have a sense of how to do both as much as you can. And again, COVID's a good time to do that. Now is a good time to just sit and bang out Photoshop classes and CG work. I've tried to do that. I feel like I know where my strengths and weaknesses are, and I've been really fortunate to work with the right people that I can give them a photo. I know what that photo needs to look like. I know what I want to achieve from it, and I know that I'm not the best person to take what I've shot to where I want it to be, because it's a complete different craft. It's the same as, taking a photo, doing post-production, and then printing it. Like, I'm not a master printer. I never will be. I know what I want it to look like, but I know people that can make that happen. So I think
building the team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only way. I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am today if it wasn't for a bunch of people that I've been fortunate to meet and work with, and guide me in the right direction, teach me, educate me, learn from them. And they have their skill sets that I will never fully have. I'd rather focus my work on getting them the best quality file, best quality image, for them to use their skill sets to move forward. So again, everyone has their own workflow that works for me. That happens to be what I think is the best where I am right now in my career. But you should learn. You should want to learn how to do at least have an idea of it.
Dangerous enough in each aspect, so you
exactly.
Right.
Speaking that language is really crucial, because I couldn't speak that language. My researcher is one of the best in the world. I couldn't speak that language to begin with. So my learning process my learning curve had to be it was steep. Sure. And I had to do it quickly, because I was wasting a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get across something to him that he wasn't understanding what I was trying to do. So the more that you're familiar with that, you can speak the same language. It just cuts down time, and cutting down time cuts down money. So, but yeah,
it's a huge point. It cuts time and it cuts money. If you do the research, if you spend the time learning of just a little bit about each one of the facets, you're a better overall photographer, or a better overall, and you can save a ton of time and a ton of money, because there's no back and forth bullshit. Basically, you can just figure out how to do it.
And to that point, really quickly, don't be scared to make, I say this in every one of my webinars, and I apologize for repeating it again. Don't be scared to make mistakes on a project that you think was junk or useless. I have 50 projects that will never see the light of day because they were just crap. They just didn't work out. It was a good idea. I tried it and it just didn't work out. But I guarantee you, I learned something from every one of those that I then applied something else. I learned more about photography from my exoskeleton project than I've done probably in the last 10 years, because it involves lighting, composition, patience, stupid amount of post-production, massive attention to detail, learning about diffraction, learning about macro, learning about how to do rail and mathematical calculations to get my magnification correct. It's just been one of these mammoth projects that I've taken tiny snippets of that and I've then applied to my latest shoot that I did with Aston. I learned something from that insect project that I applied to Aston Martin. So I think don't be scared to go out there and try something. You're going to learn something. You're going to make mistakes. You should make mistakes. You should always try and learn something new. There's no such thing as the world's greatest photographer. I just don't believe in that concept. You're never going to be the world's greatest photographer because that doesn't exist. So you're going to be learning until the day you die. Just be prepared to make those, challenge yourself, especially now. What else are you going to do? There's nothing better to do. Do something.
So that's good. It kind of sparks this idea. What do you think about spec?
In terms of
like
just doing.
We're in COVID. There's not a lot of stuff going on. We've got a ton of time on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
Do we shoot spec?
I have. Why not? It gets you out there. It stops your brain from rotting. It puts an idea in your head. You just go out and shoot it. Go out with your friends. I got in a car we did car-to-car stuff the other day just because I was kind of, I said I took February off. I did 2 shoots because I couldn't get away from it. But it's just go out and do a spec shoot and then send it out to some agents. Like you said, you do a photo shoot for a car brand and send it out to some of your contacts that you have at agencies. Hey, this is what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Stay in contact with them. Let them know that you are still hungry, that you're still trying to create content.
Yeah, I think that's great. And how do you think that the tone of your work? I have my own answer, but I'm more interested in yours. How do you think the tone of your work has changed over the past year? And is that a good? I mean, it happens, so like there's nothing you can do. But is it a good thing? Is it a setback? How are you kind of embracing that?
I don't think my tone. Well, for those that know me, I shoot a variety of things consciously because I hate the concept of just doing one thing. I just think I get easily bored from if I was to just shoot cars all day long, I would be bored out of my skull.
Yeah.
I need to get up in a plane. I need to throw some paint around. I need to work on a personal project of this idea that I thought of in the shower. So for me, it's hard. My tone is really create the best quality work that you can produce given what you're shooting. So my tone really hasn't changed, other than I've probably become more attention to detail, more fanatical about the final product and the final image of how I want it to look. The only thing I guess, I really got with COVID, I actually created my own home studio. I sort of always had it, but it allowed me the time to really set aside a room where it's just full of gear that I can wake up at 2 a.m. and if I need to shoot something to test it, I can do that. So I've learned a lot more about lighting during COVID than I've done probably in the last few years. Just again, trial and error, learning online, figuring a different technique or trying something, or how did that person shoot that? I really like the look of that. How did they do it? Like try and replicate that. And then you come up with new concepts of your own. You come up with new techniques. You come up with new you have to get new gear if that's necessary. I switched my gear around from Pro Photo to Broncolor. That was a huge step. So having that sort of testing area has been really fortunate for me. And I have it now, even in a new home. I have a whole new studio set up that's just gonna give me a lot more breathing room and breathing space to do it. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's my tone, and it's matured, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's a fine wine.
Right. So a change for the better. That's good.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, you know, the whole concept is that we're progressing, hopefully to get better as time goes on. You know, the more we know, the more we can apply it. So
Yeah.
hopefully we should see. In fact, I don't delete any of my images. I still have all my images that I shot from 15 years ago. And every now and again, I will go through them because I want to see why did I think that shot was a good shot when I took it 15 years ago? I want to see that progression of my composition, my technique, my quality of the gear that I was using.
Study
I never,
your own work, basically.
yeah, and I think that's a good therapy. I mean, I don't do it every day, for God's sake, but I do it maybe once every 6 months to a year. I'll go through some old work to see what was I thinking? Why did I think that was a good shot? Because I wouldn't include that in my portfolio right now. In fact, everything that's on my portfolio now is being shot in the last 5 years, 6 years. Everything else before that is just gone because I just don't think it's good enough. So I think that's just a good exercise for people to do, especially now during COVID. Look through your own work, see how far, see which way you're progressing. Are you progressing as quickly as you'd like in the right direction? I think you can learn a lot from work that you think was good at the time or thought wasn't good enough at the time. So
yeah, that's great.
All right, well, we could probably talk like this for the next 20 hours, to be honest. And this is just a sense of the kind of conversations that we're going to be having. I think it's important to be very fluid and back and forth and learn more about the participants that we're going to be bringing on and what makes them unique and what are they working on, what are the cool projects they're doing. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this going forward.
Yeah.
Do you have any final comments on your end?
I want to echo what you're saying. I think we got everybody from Netflix executives to digitech to cinematographers to landscape to studio. I think we're going to talk with a little bit of everybody. We might even bring some more and talk with them. I think that it's important to understand the other side of the camera too, to hear what are those people. How can we be better understanding what the front of the camera, how they feel and how they believe. So it'll be different every time. It's not going to be, we're not going to get stale here. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it'll be, you know, I think it's important to have small aspects of the technical side of things. We may be discussing a technique or some new gear that they're shooting on, but it's really meant to be an all-round conversation. What are they working on? How are they doing? What are some of the things that you've liked, not liked? So it's definitely tune in.